Getting the most from your team or from a team remains one of the most critical factors that a lot of entrepreneurs are actually looking for. Making sure you can get the most out of your team is what most of the entrepreneurs I speak to always keep reiterating, which is why I've spent a lot of time discussing performance management. How do you measure the what and how do you measure the how of people's performance? But today, one of the things I want to talk about are some of the tools that will enable you as an entrepreneur to properly run that performance management system in your organization, something that makes the process effortless and seamless and keeps it top of mind for everyone in the organization. My name is Deji Adebusoye. I'm a partner at Sahel Capital, and I'm the author of Scaling for Success, Empowering African SMEs. So I want to start the process of discussing tools and systems that will enable you as an entrepreneur or as an organization to properly measure performance, the what and the how. The first thing I'm going to talk about is you need to have a proper organization structure with well-defined KPIs. And I know many organizations typically talk about this. We have an organization structure, but the question is, what does your organization structure, what does it say? What does it speak to? Many people feel like you need to have a big organization or maybe 30, 40, 100 people before you can have a structure in place. But even with 1, 2 people, you should have a structure, and I will explain why. In one of the earlier videos, I've talked about having a proper vision. You know what you want to achieve as a company. You know where you're going to as a company. Now, what you need to do is you need to now draft a structure that helps you achieve that vision. It doesn't matter whether you're going to fill all the spots in that structure. Yes, it doesn't matter, but you need to have that structure. Let me give you a very good example. In an organization, maybe an FMCG that sell into the sales of soap, manufacturing and sales of soap. So you have a structure that says you are the CEO. Just below that structure, for example, you have a head of sales, you have a head of marketing, you have a manufacturing director, you have maybe a supply chain manager. Then under the sales head of sales, there are regional sales managers. Under them, there are sales assistants. In each of those lines, the organization structure is fully shown that these are the people required for this vision to be achieved. Now, you might not have filled every one of those spots, but it gives you an idea of the trajectory you're going to go on. It helps you to know that at the next phase of my growth, then I need to fill in 1, 2, 3 spots. A good example was L&Z. When we started supporting L&Z in scaling, one of the things we did was to put in place an organization structure. We tweaked it quite a number of times just to be sure that it accurately captured and represents what the vision of the company was. But for a long time, not all the roles were filled. But as the company was scaling, we were recognizing that at some point, it will be important to fill certain roles in that organization. And you understand why I'm harping on having a proper organization structure as we go on. The same thing at Sahel, the team I manage, which is SEFAA, which invests across a couple of countries in sub-Saharan Africa. Because we are always raising capital, what we did was we put a structure in place for the evolution of capital. So we said that once we are at the current stage where we have a fund size of about $25 million, this is a team that is required. At the stage where we hit the $75 million mark, this is the structure that we need. So we have that structure in place and we know the roles that need to be filled. But guess what? What we have right now filled are people that are required for the next phase of growth, which is to hit the $44 million mark. That helps to keep things in perspective for us to know, okay, it's time to hire 1 more person in this role because we are currently at this stage of our growth. It's important to have that organization structure in place. Now, the second thing you need to do once you have the organization structure in place is to ensure that that structure drives your performance management process. In other words, you don't circumvent the process. There's a reason why you have the structure in place. You as the owner or the entrepreneur, you don't want to fiddle or meddle into the business of the people that are driving their process in their team. And I'll give examples. Still staying on the example of the head of sales. You have the head of sales. He has 2 regional sales managers that are reporting to him. Then those regional sales managers have sales assistants reporting to them. When the regional sales managers want to conduct the assessment, remember when we talked about conducting assessment, measuring things like the KPIs, you define KPIs for them, you want to track whether they met the KPIs or not, the 360-degree feedback to measure the how that they will get. You want to make sure that the sales manager at that point gets his 360-degree feedback from peers within the organization, from people that are one level up. Does not necessarily even be from his own manager, who is the head of sales. It can be from other head of different unit, like the supply chain head or marketing head or finance head, who he probably has interacted with at some point. Then he also gets feedback from people that are below him in the organization, like the sales assistants, or even in other functions, people that are lower in terms of the level or the band that in which he is. Now, when it comes to time to review, the regional sales manager has to drive the review process with the sales assistants, because they are the ones that he's trying to measure, and he has to have ownership of measuring their performance. Once he's able to track and measure that performance, you as a CEO don't want to start getting involved in all those little details at this point. You allow that structure to measure and track performance, define performance, measure and track performance. Let that organization process track that process. And the important thing also is, you as the CEO, don't think that you're out of the woods. You need a proper accountability structure. In other words, if you have a board in place, like one of the things we've talked about before, you need to also have your KPIs assessed by your board. And part of your 360 degrees should also be provide a feedback right back into your board from your reports. And of course, you want to make it as anonymized as possible. One of the things I've seen is that CEOs don't really get the right feedback from their employees, because nobody wants to give a review that probably is not as positive as it should. So you want to be careful also in terms of the way you manage your report, so that they are able to provide the right feedback to you as an employee. So that's the second thing. Have an organization, let the organization structure drive the process. The third thing you want to ensure is that process is fair, because if it's not a fair process, in fact, not just that it's fair, it is perceived as being fair. There are two different things. It could be fair but not perceived as being fair. It has to be perceived as being fair to be effective. And to do that, one of the things you have to ensure is that there is a process for you or the organization to make sure that the process is not weaponized. What do I mean by that? If a manager has full responsibility for the performance of the people that reports to him, it is not out of the world to see managers weaponize that process against the people that are working with them. If they don't like you, they weaponize that process against you. It is not unusual, but it's very important to make sure that at some point in the review process, you as the manager or the one-up manager is involved in the assessment of the employees that are below the person that reports to you. What do I mean by that? Still using that sales analogy. Whenever the sales manager is assessing the sales assistants, let him drive the process. But at some point in the review process, the sales manager and the sales assistant needs to sit with the regional sales manager so that he has an input into those conversations that are happening. What that does is it gives the people that are lower in the organization the opportunity to hear how they feel about how they are being assessed. That is important, because you don't want a situation where the process is weaponized against the employees and it completely disrupts and destroys whatever you're trying to build. Now, some people might ask and say, what if the head of sales and the sales manager gang up against the sales assistant? Maybe for some reason he's not cooking up numbers that they want him to cook up for whatever reason. What happens in that situation? Well, we probably can't address that today. It just means you have a bigger problem than just performance management in your team when they start ganging up against somebody in your organization. So that's the third thing. Make sure that the process is fair and is perceived to be fair in the organization. And then the fourth thing is you ensure that it runs periodically. Let it be something that is ingrained, that either we do it once a year or twice a year, or we do it quarterly or we do it monthly, but let everybody understand that there is a timeline to performance management. Most organizations will do well with just 2 times. You do one towards the end of the year to assess the KPIs and measure performance for what has happened in the course of the year. But then during the middle of the year, having set the KPIs at the start of the year, you also want to assess and ask, how well are we doing and how well are we tracking against the set KPIs during the middle of the year? In case you need to change strategy, you need to tweak things, you need to move people around, because at the end of the day, you want to ensure that you are meeting your objectives as an organization. The final thing I'm going to talk about is making sure there's a system for aggrieved employees. So if you have employees that feel aggrieved by the process, you want to make sure there's a place or there's a system for them to air their views. So whether it's an anonymized email that is being sent to a particular email to say, I don't think my appraisal was fair, you need to have something in place so that everyone feels like they are being heard, in terms of the way the process has run. In conclusion, I just want to emphasize that it's extremely critical that you measure performance in your team, and in doing that, you want to have a process to ensure that you're able to properly measure, articulate, and document how how performance is being measured on the team. Thank you very much. Please do like, comment, and share on this subject so that we can continue to make other videos like this to continue to empower and strengthen African SMEs. Thank you.